Funding for Issues in Focus is provided as a public service by Browning Ferris Industries. Good evening, I'm Jack Campbell. This is Issues in Focus. This evening our guest is Mr. Jack Donohue. Jack, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
When I found out that you were willing to be a guest on Issues in Focus, I also found out from a number of people in this town that you were the finest investigative reporter that Houston's newspapers ever had. So with that piece of flattery, let me tell our viewers that you've written many novels. You were on all three of the Houston newspapers, including the Houston Press, the Houston Chronicle, and the Houston Post. And you also have been a noted ghostwriter, except for one thing. You don't kiss and tell, so we can't say what the names of the books are, but two of them at least have been bestsellers, and you are currently ghosting for a famous person, and only the insiders will find out who that is, and not on tonight's show. So thank you very much, Jack, for joining us.
Quite a summation there, but I didn't think my life could be pulled together like that.
The other thing I'd say is that when you got into the press, you're not a journalism school graduate, but you started off as a pile driver building the Foley's downtown and went to work for the press.
Yes, it was a tremendous project, as you might understand, and I'd just come back from the war, and it was in '46, and I worked down there until it started raining in September of that year. And Noah never saw nothing, brother, I'll tell you, because it rained so much that it finally filled that tremendous excavation, and everybody had to quit work, and I told everybody I was going to go into the newspaper business, and I did.
And you rose to being manager editor, and in fact, we're not only managing editor in Houston of the Post, I believe,
right,
but you went off to Los Angeles and were managing editor of the Mirror,
right,
which was run by Dorothy Chandler. And I want to compare the newspaper business from those days to today, but in our conversation, I think the first question that interests me is the number of women in journalism that you were associated with. You were associated with Dorothy Chandler in Los Angeles.
Yes.
You were associated with Mrs. Hobby here in Houston. What was she like as a... She turned the Post around, didn't she?
Oh, yes, most good. I hear people say what a very brilliant woman she is.
Yeah.
She was a very brilliant person. I mean, she one of the most magnificent people I ever knew in my life. And I've never seen anyone ever in any line of business who could get to the heart of a matter quicker. And I remember we'd have editorial conferences, and we'd all, about 7 or 8 of us, be sitting around a big table there, and she'd be sitting there. We'd be drinking coffee. Everything would be very precise and prim. And she'd say, "Now, Jack, what do you think about this matter?" And I'd tell her. And so, what do you think? She'd go around the tables. Maybe she would come back and say, "Well, now, Jack, say again that last part of what you said. Not say again that last part." And somebody. And then when she asked a question, she'd say, "Now, this is what we're going to do." And I'll tell you, that's what we did. And it may not have always been right, but it was close to it, I'll tell you. She had just an uncanny sense of news.
You also worked with Betty Ewing and Ann Hodges, who are still very active ladies.
And Margaret Davis, who was magnificent.
Yeah.
Of course, Betty could do anything, you understand?
I know she plays the piano.
But Betty writes society stuff, but hell, Betty could cover a murder or it didn't make any difference what it was, she could do it. Of course, all of those ladies could in those days. Margaret Davis was probably the best, I'd say the top 4 or 5 best reporters I ever knew in my life. Mm-hmm. But there were a lot of them like that.
Now, Ann Hodges would not have been doing television in the 50s, would she? Or?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't remember. Sometime you're gonna catch me on something that I don't remember everything about. I just know that she's a lovely lady, I'll tell you that, and very good at what she does.
Yeah. How do you contrast the city of Houston in the 50s to the city that it is today, and also the newspaper business?
Well, that's an interesting situation you brought up there. You've got to understand that, of course, the city was much smaller then, but Houston has been a boom town since 1901, so the boom of the 80s, the early 80s and the late 70s is nothing new. I mean, the damn town was always booming.
Yeah.
But the difference between the 50s and the 80s is not only the people, but the situation. In the 50s, the town was wide open to gamblers. I mean, this was the most wide open city that you ever saw. Everything illegal was legal here. I mean, it made New Orleans look like Waco, Texas, you understand?
So it really wasn't down in Galveston where I was told that all the crime was.
Well, it was there, but it was held out. Houston was so much bigger than Galveston.
Yeah.
And in Galveston, it was almost semi-legal. But in Houston, it was supposed to be illegal, but it wasn't. As a matter of fact, the wire service that furnished the news for the horse races came into Houston. And there were, in downtown Houston alone, now you think about this, there were 140 wire drops off that main wire to bookie shops in downtown Houston. Hell, you could walk down Main Street and hear guys calling the races in some joint in there. They'd almost come out on the street and grab you and jerk you in and make you bet. Of course, it wasn't just that. I mean, they had every kind of gambling. They had casinos around. J.K. Friedman had this great joint at the end of Maine that could make anything in Las Vegas look pretty bad because it was gorgeous inside.
Yeah.
And of course, all the oil men in town went out there, and they were all living off their depletion allowance money, which they were supposed to be taking and spending drilling new wells.
Yeah.
Because they were getting it tax-free. Of course, they were going out there and giving it to Jakey. Yeah. And he took it. So the temperament of the town was different then. It still was that gung-ho stuff like it was here before everything hit the fan. But it was a little bit freer, little easier. And I was just thinking the other day, I was just trying to make a contrast here. Here's Houston now has the first woman mayor in its history with Kathy Whitmire. And I was trying to contrast her with, say, somebody like Oscar Holcomb, the old gray fox. Here she is, the appearance she gives at least is of being a very straight-laced person and so on. And Oscar was just as loose as he could be. I mean, the town, you understand, a town like Houston in those days, or any time, cannot run wide open to gamblers and thieves and outlaws without the knowledge and consent of at least 4 people. That's the mayor and the chief of police and the district attorney and the sheriff. If either one of the 4 says no, it can't work. So you can imagine that all of them were in on it up to their neck, and everybody was in on the take, and everybody was getting fat. And but Oscar was such a charming outlaw. I remember the press. I was working at the press at this time, and we had passed a certain circulation goal, and we were all so proud of it, you know. And we were having a big party up there in the city room, and we had the whiskey and whatever else, maybe even had a cake, I don't know. I don't know what we did, but we may have had it. And about that time, somebody said, "Hey, look." And out in front was this big limousine, and Oscar got out. And he came and he walked in, he never said a word to anybody. He walked over and he stepped right up on top of the copy desk. And he said, "Listen, I figured I'd invite myself to this party since I'm more responsible for your circulation increase than anybody else." And he was, because we wrote so many stories about it. And then, of course, in the 52, we had Roy Hoffheims as a mayor. And
known as the judge.
well, he wasn't then. He was known as Roy Hoofhands then. I mean, because we used to make fun of him. But long after that, he became very sober-sided citizen. And of course, he always was a great hustler. You know, and he became a folk hero when he built the Dome. But before that, he was not. And matter of fact, he probably had the worst administration of any mayor that ever was in the city of Houston. But indeed, when he was finally kicked out of office, the polls closed at 7 o'clock, and he conceded at 7:15. He had that few votes, and his opponent had so many more. So, but nevertheless, while he was there, it was a colorful time. He fought continuously with the city council, and he was such a great fighter. Oh, he was a clever man, and of course, he was a very articulate person, and he could just tear them to pieces with his tongue, you know. And
Do you suppose that we're now, of course, in the political year, and we're about to choose a new president, and I've now lived long enough that I appreciate the arguments about whether you want a leader or an administrator, whether you want a manager or a personality, a salesman, and the chances are you want both, and the pendulum sort of swings. You describe Oscar Holcomb and Hofheinz as being colorful figures. They also must have been good for the city in their own way.
Oh, my God, Oscar, of course, you understand, he didn't mind slicing himself a piece of the cake for he and his friends, but he built big cakes. He baked big cakes. I mean, he probably contributed more to the city's growth than anyone. But as I say, he didn't mind cutting himself a slice, you know. And his friends all approved of him very much.
Now, when you were working, this is before you went to California, you're the young reporter, and you are, as I in my introduction said, still known as the great investigative reporter here in Houston.
Well, I don't know.
But you told me just before we went on the air that everything in those days was a scandal. That was the approach to reporting.
Well, that's what we called it. I mean, it was semi-fun, you know. We'd say, "Oh, what great scandal are you working on?" You know. So, and of course, it seemed as if there always was a great scandal, you know.
Well, there's one I know where you were undercover man at the farmers market.
Oh yeah, that was way. I don't know where you heard about that one. That was.
You've got a lot of, by the way, friends that have contributed some of your stories to me, so I could find out, because I do not remember these stories.
I had been working at the Chronicle, and I'd just gone back to the press, and this was early in '49. And I found out, I've forgotten how, that the market master and a lawyer, a friend of his, great names, Jake Murray and Goose Goslin, isn't that great? Had figured out a way to really beat these people who had their stalls set up down there. Out of the money, they made them get a permit, and of course it was illegal as hell. Nobody had to get a permit, and they had to pay for this quite a bit. And so I went down there, and I managed to open up a stall with some vegetables. I don't know where in the hell I got them. But of course I had to get a permit and pay for it and so forth. And I worked around there 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know, maybe a week, till I just had everything very cold. I had them where they couldn't escape. And Bill Cooksey, who was the world's greatest photographer, newspaper photographer, would sneak down there and get pictures of everything. He had pictures of these guys even making people sign these things that they didn't even know he ever took. Of course, he had pictures of me loading up this stuff and working like hell, you know what I mean? And it wound up, I don't know whether the lawyer was disbarred or not, but something terrible happened to him, and they fired the market master and maybe something else. But I remember a headline in the press that an old boy wrote. I'm trying to think of it. Ted Hutchison, who was a news editor, who wrote some of the most glorious headlines you ever read in your life. And he said, "Murray's fees cooks Goslin's goose."
Well, now, in spite of the illegal, the scandalous part, and you're having to buy these permits that weren't really necessary, you still were able to make money in the farmers market, weren't you?
Well, but I tried to hide this from the editor, but somehow, somewhere down there, I don't know what, I bought a load of bell peppers from a guy. But doing this just to maintain my cover, you understand? At a distressed price, he had to go somewhere. And I sold them for a tremendous profit. And I'll be damned if the bookkeeping department at the paper didn't make me give them my profit. And
Incidentally, I want to interrupt you for a second. For anyone that just joined us late, we're talking with Jack Donohugh, who is known as the finest investigative reporter on 3 newspapers here in Houston, when we had 3, the Press, the Post, and the Chronicle. Then went off to a distinguished writing career in Hollywood, where he wrote movie scripts, novels, historical novels, and ghosted several celebrity books, 2 of which were bestsellers, and he's not a kiss and tell author, so he won't tell us on this show for whom he ghosted. Now, getting though back to scandals, I know you did these really, it sounds almost gumshoe sort of Bogart type things. For instance, you were talking about the HISD scandal.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
I can tell you some about it. I don't know whether I can tell you all that much. My memory might not be quite that good, but I think it's interesting you bring this up simply because they're having this little tiff now between this woman, Gina Wright, and the superintendent, Miss Raymond, and a few other little things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, hell, that's nothing, you know. Back in the 50s, the school board was divided between the liberals and the conservatives, and they absolutely hated each other. They fought over everything. It didn't make any difference what the hell it was, and they didn't care about the kids.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, you'd think that they never even thought about them. And they fought about school lunches. They fought about whether kids ought to know that the United Nations existed or not, you know. And of course, they really fought over race, but didn't ever mention it.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think of other things, but I guess the main thing that intrigued us then, LaRoe, the man at the Post then that I worked for directly was Arthur LaRoe, who was the executive editor.
Just passed away recently.
Right, a very brilliant man. And Jack Harris was head of KPRC TV then, and a very good friend of his. And Harris had just given him a television set to put in his office. And I walked in there one day to talk to him about something, and he was looking at the television set. And he said, "Look at this man." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, that's Hubert Mills, H.L. Mills, the businessman of the school district." He said, "He's a thief." I said, "How do you know, Arthur?" He said, "I know he's a thief. Catch him." But it turned out that he finally had to resign in disgrace. But this man was the cleverest human being. He was a mean man, and he had driven school superintendents out of their minds by the viciousness of his tax on them. But man, he knew how to reward his friends and really beat hell out of his enemies. But the way he rewarded his friends, and it took me a good while to catch him. And I could not have caught him without a lot of help from people that worked for the school system. And I'm talking about maids and janitors and the kind of people who felt his wrath all the time, you know. And I mean, they would give me stuff at midnight at the post office, and I'd meet people in the bank, and they'd hand me little notes and things. I mean, it was wonderful to participate in, but it was also wonderful to see these people putting everything they had on the line, because this man would have just like that with them. Anyway, the thing that we really nabbed him on, and it was just beautiful. There was a school here in town called the Sherman School, and it burned down. Well, now the school system had a rule that anything that cost over $1,000 before Mills could make an expenditure, he had to get approval from the school board. I want you to know that this guy rebuilt that whole damn school without ever telling him, by writing checks for $999. Now, I'm going to tell you how many $100,000 worth of checks he wrote for $999 each. And of course, what made it even more intriguing was all of them went to a dead man. I was trying to remember his name the other day.
Well, I'd heard the story.
Marisek, Joe Marisek.
I see.
And I started trying to find Joe Marisek after I found out what he was doing. And of course, I couldn't find him because he was dead. But I found out that he had a couple of sons who worked for the school system in the, I forgot what department, anyway. But what they were doing, they were the school system was paying them a salary, and that they were contracted on the side under their dead father's name to rebuild this damn school. So everybody was having a lot of fun, making a lot of money, and, you know, and it seemed almost a shame to break it up, you know.
Yeah. Now, you also saved the life of a man from execution, electrocution, as a matter of fact, in San Angelo.
Well, I mean, that's what he said. Yeah.
Well, I would think that he would have reason to thank the right person.
Well, this was a terrible case of injustice, rank injustice, matter of fact. This old boy was charged with murdering his wife by planting a bomb in her car. And the district attorney had a vendetta against him. So the sheriff out there, the police chief, and the Texas Rangers for, like I said, it's been years back now, and I really don't remember, but there were a variety of reasons why they really wanted him badly. And they had prepared to really just railroad him right to the chair. But somehow just nothing that they ever said rang true in my mind. I mean, I was here in Houston, but I was getting this stuff from our reporters, and I was reading the other papers, and it was a tremendous case because that's a very prominent man, and his wife also was a very prominent one, and there were reporters running around out there signing it over from everywhere, and so I kept complaining about it, and the editor of the paper was George Carmack. And if you never met George Carmack, you never met a newspaper man in your life. He was just a goddamn great one, I'll tell you that. And I was bleeding one day sitting out there at my desk, and he came to his door. He said, I'll tell you what, if I was Jack Donohugh, I would get up off of my butt, and I'd tell my assistant city editor to sit in my chair, and I'd go out to the airport, and I'd get on a plane, and I'd go out to San Angelo and find out what the hell is happening, and either shut up or either find out or shut up. So I caught a plane in about an hour or two, and it was, I won't go into all the detail there because it makes me sound like a gumshoe or something, but with the help of a great reporter that we had at the press named Ed Norton, who worked this in here while I worked out there, we found out that he really didn't have anything to do with it. And we found out who did do it, and the man finally, got a life sentence for.
So you nailed the actual person, and you got the other man out of prison, and saved him from electrocution.
That's what he said.
I can't let this conversation that we're having go by without raising the name of Glenn McCarthy, another Irishman. I'm assuming Jack Donohugh is Irish. And Glenn McCarthy, I have always wanted to meet, but he's in recent years not been in good health, and of course...
I always thought I could whip him, when we were young, and he would always tell me, if anytime you feel ready, we'll just get out on the green, Of course, I never said it unless I was about half smashed, but...
the green is the right color for Glenn McCarthy. Now, you know him well enough to know, what was his reaction to the famous Edna Ferber, who wrote the book Giant, on which the James Dean character is...
Well, I don't know whether you noticed his reaction not when they announced they were going to tear down the Shamrock.
Yeah.
You would have thought, by God, he was going to get a pickaxe and run up and down the street slaying people. Well, that's just his way he was with Ferber. Oh, he was just absolutely furious, and he never was a man to try to hide how he felt about anything. He was never a man. If he loved you, he'd tell you. Yeah. And if he didn't like you, he'd tell you. And as a matter of fact, if he didn't like you, he'd probably hit you. And
he lived hard, he played hard, and worked hard, I guess.
There were several things about him that always impressed me. He found oil where a lot of other people couldn't, and made him a millionaire. That's one thing. He was so physically strong for a man who, of course, he was a well set up man, very handsome man, and marvelous physique. But nevertheless, no one, I thought, until they felt it, could really believe that the man could be so strong. I've seen him just pick up people and just push them up against the wall. I'm talking about big men, big heavy men. And of course, he lost a few. He wouldn't get mad at me for saying this. If he did, I wouldn't care. But he loved to fight. And if he didn't win, he'd bleed about it and complain about it. But deep in his heart, he was more interested in the fight. But he really loved physical action. And the Clark Club, when he owned the Shamrock, the Clark Club was really a cockpit. I mean, anybody who really thought he knew how to fight went out there to fight sometime with the others. And I remember one time there was an old boy, a preacher's son, from Tawakona Creek. You don't know where in hell Tawakona Creek is, but it's on the way to Waco. And a little community there. I don't know how in the hell this old boy got there, but it's a good story how he got there. I don't think he'd ever had a drink before in his life, you know. And I don't know how he got in the car club, but he got in and got pretty drunk.
Yeah.
One of those hot shots challenged him, you know, and the old boy started cleaning out the joint. And he started doing a damn good job of it, and Glenn came charging in there about that time. And the old boy hit old Glenn a pretty good one. And then turned around to fight somebody else about it. And Glenn was feeling no pain at this time himself, you know, whiskey-wise.
Yeah.
And he threw a punch at that old boy that missed him. But he had a door, I'm talking about a big, thick, solid wood door, and absolutely demolished him. Just tore it off. And I wrote about it. Made him so mad when I wrote about this in the paper. When I said something, I said the best punch of the fight was when McCarthy hit the door. You know?
Our time is almost up, but before we call it quits, someone was telling me that your training as a journalist was strictly on the job. You never went to journalism school.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that really even possible today to do?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm not saying that there aren't people that have the talent, but would the institutions allow people without journalism training?
I've just been away too long to be an authority on that. I couldn't answer it for you. Only thing that I can say to you that if I've known very good newspapermen who both had journalism educations and didn't, and all things being even, I think it'd be foolish to say that the one with the journalism degree wouldn't be a better. But some of the best ones that I ever knew did not have one, you know. And I'm talking about both men and women. But I know one of the brightest, most wonderful young reporters I ever saw. I was sitting there at my desk one day, and I was busy as hell. We were getting out the home edition or something, and I looked up, and this guy had come up, and he was talking to my secretary there. Big old boy, about 6 feet. Looked like Jack Armstrong, all-American boy, you know. And anyway, I won't go into a lot of detail, but it was Tommy Thompson, and he'd just gotten out of University of Texas the day before, I think. And he was looking for a job. And I heard him in 10 minutes. And in 3 months, I would have sent him anywhere for anything. So I mean, I don't know whether him going to journalism school helped him a damn bit, because I think he was a natural anyway. Yeah. But he was just a natural. And like, as I say, I think one of the blessings of a city editor's life, or any editor, but a city editor's, especially his life, is when he can hand an assignment to a reporter, and they come back and lay it on his desk, and it's all wrapped up and got a blue ribbon on it, and he doesn't have to say, why in the hell didn't you ask him this, or why didn't you do this? And that's the way, when he brought them in, they were wrapped and had blue ribbon on it.
That was Tommy Thompson. I've just gotten a note that our time is up, and it's been going very fast. I want to say thank you very much, Jack Donohugh, for being our guest on Issues in Focus, and a special thanks to our good friend John Davenport for making the connection with you. This has been Issues in Focus. Our executive producer is Cal Jones. In just a moment, you'll see the names of the volunteers at Access Houston who have made this whole program possible, rolling across the screen. Issues in Focus is underwritten by a grant from Browning Ferris Industries. My name's Jack Campbell. See you next week, and that's 30.